Hello friends, let us now learn some important points about the right upper lobe bronchus. Okay, first, this is the right lung. This is the trachea. Okay, in the trachea we have the left lung and we have the right lung. Right lung is divided into right upper lobe bronchus and we have right lower lobe bronchus. So first we will see the right upper lobe bronchus. So this is not actually a good diagram. So let me draw a better diagram. Yeah, this is a good diagram. So we have first trachea, then we have right bronchus, left bronchus. Right bronchus is divided into right upper lobe bronchus and right lower lobe bronchus. This right upper lobe bronchus, usually it leaves the main stem at the level of carina, and immediately it divides into different segmental bronchi. That means it doesn't have this much place, right? What does it do? This right upper lobe bronchus will immediately separate at the level of carina itself. If this is the carina, at the level of carina itself, you can see this separation of right upper lobe bronchus. Okay, this right upper lobe bronchus, again, it divides into three main parts. One we have supplying the apical segment, then it supplies the posterior segment and anterior segment of upper lobe. So in the apical segment again divides into apical and posterior rami of apical segment. Posterior segmental bronchi divides into posterior and lateral rami of posterior segment, and anterior segmental bronchi divides into anterior and lateral rami of anterior segment. So overall, we have apical and posterior rami of apical segment, posterior and lateral rami of posterior segment, anterior and lateral rami of posterior segment. Right. So if you see, this is the same. This is actually subsegmental bronchi distribution. Subsegmental bronchi is, these are actually segmental bronchi. What apical, posterior, anterior are segmental bronchi. And these are again divided into subsegments. So we have subsegmental bronchi. So how are they seen? See, here in the subsegmental bronchi, this posterior segment and apical, see, this is apical segment. This one is apical segment. Okay, I'll draw with good pen. This one is apical segment. This one is apical segmental bronchus, which is supplying the apical segment. Then we have two. This two is the anterior segmental bronchus supplying the anterior segment. Then this three, which you are seeing here, this three is posterior segmental bronchi supplying the posterior segment. So if you see in the apical segmental bronchi is again divided into posterior rami and apical rami of apical segment. Posterior and apical rami of apical segment. Similarly, here we have 2A is lateral and 2B is anterior rami of anterior segment. 3A is again lateral and 3B is posterior rami of posterior segment. So here you can see there is trifurcation of lobar bronchus. That means one lobar bronchus, that is right upper lobe bronchus, is divided into three parts. One we have apical segmental bronchi, posterior segmental bronchi and anterior segmental bronchi. Each of them are again divided into different parts. So let me tell you again. So the right upper lobe bronchus divides into three parts: apical segmental bronchi, posterior segmental bronchi and anterior segmental bronchi. This apical segmental bronchi divides into apical and posterior subsegmental bronchi. Anterior segmental bronchi, this one will again divided into lateral and anterior subsegmental bronchi. And posterior segmental bronchi is also divided into posterior and lateral subsegmental bronchi. So this is actually the actual division of subsegmental bronchi. So if I completely erase it, this is what we see here. Now, this is trifurcation, but there can also be bifurcation of right upper lobe bronchus. This is actually a different variation. Okay, if the bifurcation occurs, what actually happens is whenever there is bifurcation, two of them will arise from the right upper lobe bronchus and the third one will appear from either of the two. So here if you see apical and anterior divisions. Apical and anterior segments arise from one division and the posterior segment from the other. So if you see, if this is the right upper lobe bronchus, we have two divisions. This is one which is giving apical and anterior division. Similarly, this is other which is giving posterior divisions. See, let me tell you again. See, this is the right upper lobe bronchus. This divides into two parts, one part and the second part. Second part is giving third, which is nothing but posterior segment, whereas the first division is giving two parts, apical segment, it is supplying the apical segment, and this one is apical segment, two is anterior segment. So if I have to say, this is bifurcation of right upper lobe bronchus, where the right upper lobe bronchus divides into two parts. Number one, which is the first division. This is the second division. The first division will give rise to two subsegmental bronchi. It gives rise to two segmental bronchi. It gives rise to apical segmental bronchi, which is 1, and anterior segmental bronchi, which is 2. This second division will give rise to 3, which is posterior segmental bronchi. So this is actually the bifurcation of right upper lobe bronchus, which is a variant. Okay, next. Next, one more different variant which should be considered is about the right subsegmental subsuperior segment. So what does this subsuperior segment mean? Sometimes what happens is normally the right upper lobe, normally if you see, normally the right upper lobe divides into three parts. We have apical, we have anterior, and we have posterior. This is what normally seen. Sometimes there is four parts. It divides into four segments. Sometimes the right upper lobe bronchus or right upper lobe will divide into four segments. That is one extra segment will start. So this extra segment is actually called as right subsuperior segment. So that means what actually happens is, we have already seen normally this is the right upper lobe bronchus. This gives rise to three parts, right? Three segmental bronchi. We have apical segmental bronchi, we have anterior segmental bronchi, and we have posterior segmental bronchi. Now, from this posterior segmental bronchi, there is one extra bronchus which actually arises from this posterior segmental bronchi, which will supply the lateral region or axillary region. Okay, it is seen in only 15% of individuals. So, this lateral segment with this rami from the posterior segmental bronchi, it will give rise to the accessory, it will actually supply the accessory subsegmental bronchus. So this one here which you are seeing, this is accessory subsegmental bronchus, which is present in more than half of the normal persons. Okay, this accessory subsegmental bronchus is the lower arrow. It is seen in more than half of the normal individuals. And here if you see, there are 4 bronchi which are seen from in the right upper lobe. So from the common stem, we have apical and posterior bronchus which is occurring, and then we have anterior bronchus, and lateral or axillary bronchus is also seen. So this is lateral or axillary bronchus is also seen here. So we have an accessory segmental bronchus, and there is also a lateral or axillary bronchus which is seen in this patient. It is one of the variation. Then we have right axillary segment pneumonia. That means this um, bronchus, which is arising from the posterior bronchus and it is supplying the lateral or axillary area. If it undergoes pneumonia, you will see this right axillary segment pneumonia, and it is actually simulating the anterior segmental involvement. Okay, in the lateral view. In the lateral view, it is actually simulating the anterior segmental involvement. So you should remember this also. Then we have, so one more important thing is, why is there fourth segment? Fourth segment can be because of overdevelopment of lateral division of anterior or posterior segments. If you see in the anterior and posterior segments, we have 2 lateral subsegmental bronchi. See, we have anterior and posterior. In this, we have 2 lateral subsegmental bronchi. Due to overdevelopment of either of these lateral subsegmental bronchi, we have this one accessory small, fourth segment which is supplying the lateral or axillary region. So if you see here in the AP and lateral bronchograms, a subdivision of anterior segment is present. This is a subdivision of anterior segment which is supplying the area below the right middle lobe. This is the area below the right middle lobe. This is actually supplied by this segment which is segmental bronchus, which is subdivision of anterior segmental bronchus. So why? See, if you see, normally the upper segment of the anterior upper limit of the anterior segment can lie anywhere in the upper lobe. In the upper lobe, it can lie anywhere. Okay, but sometimes it extends into the lower area and it can enter the or it can supply the anterior area which is anterior to right middle lobe. So that means it is an extension. See, normally the anterior segment upper limit will be up to the upper lobe. But sometimes what happens is it crosses the upper lobe and it starts lying in front of the middle lobe also, like this. So this is one more thing which you should remember. Then if you see, this is one more anomaly. There is anomalous bronchus which is arising from the right side of the trachea. So this is the trachea. So there is an anomalous bronchus which is arising from the right side of the trachea above the right upper lobe. See, this is the right upper lobe bronchus. Okay, this is the trachea. So from the trachea in the right side here, if you see, this is actually the anomalous bronchus which is appearing. Which one? This one. This one is actually the anomalous bronchus which is arising from the right side of trachea, that is above the right upper lobe bronchus. It might occur normally in primates also. Then if you see, these are 2 equal sized right upper lobes. This is seen very rarely In rare conditions, there can be two right upper lobe bronchi of equal size might be seen presenting one adjacent to the other. So these are the important points about the right upper lobe. Take home message out of all these, even if you remember any of these or not, one thing that you have to remember is that right upper lobe bronchus is divided into three segmental bronchi. They are apical, posterior and anterior. Apical segmental bronchi is divided into apical and posterior subsegmental bronchi. Posterior segmental bronchi is divided into posterior and lateral subsegmental bronchi. Anterior segmental bronchi is again divided into lateral and anterior subsegmental bronchi. Thank you.